Is Stephen King a plotter or a pantser? What does that even mean? And how can it help you become a better writer, deciding between the two of them? We're going to answer those questions, and we're starting right now. People have always asked the question, which one is better, being a plotter or a pantser when writing? Well, before we answer that, we have to talk about what is a plotter or a pantser. For those of you new to writing, a plotter is someone who will plan out their novel chapter by chapter before they even start writing. They have everything written down. They know all the characters, they know how it's going to begin, they know the middle, and they know the resolution. They have everything worked out. They even make little notes on every aspect. A pantser is someone who makes up the story as they go along. They don't know how it's going to end. They're not really sure what the story is, but they have a spark. They have a feeling of something, a story in them. They feel that spark and they sit down and they start writing. And wherever the story takes them, that's where it goes. How it ends up, they don't know. But they just keep on writing until they get there. So the question is, which one are you? And which one is better? Now, a pantser will tell you that they love writing, that they just love making up the story as they go along. Whereas a plotter will tell you that it's very smart to plan out your novel and know exactly what you're writing, what's going to happen, and how it's going to end, saying that it truly makes a difference in the editing phase, because a pantser, they have a tough time when it comes to editing and writing the second draft. Because when you're a pantser, it's basically walking a straight line with your eyes closed. You can't really say you're walking a straight line because when you're a pantser, you're just making it up. So how can you even say you're walking a straight line? But a plotter, it's like being a plotter is like setting down a set of train tracks. And as you're writing, you're like the train, but you're always staying on course, chapter after chapter, because you know exactly where you're going and when you're going to get there. Now, a pantser will say that's boring. They don't like knowing where they're going to go because it takes the fun out of writing. A plotter says it actually makes the story more fun to write because you don't have to worry about wandering and ending up in the wrong spot. And then you're stuck and you're not sure how to end your story. Now the question is, what about successful writers? Are they plotters or pantsers? Now Stephen King has sold about 100 million books, and he's been around for decades. Now everybody wants to know, what is Stephen King? Does he plan his novels? Or does he just make them up as he goes along? Stephen King has done interviews in which he has clearly stated he is a pantser. He likes making them up as he writes. He doesn't know how the story is going to end when he begins. It ends wherever it ends. Whenever he comes up with an idea, he says he always starts everything as a short story. He doesn't plan on writing 1,000 pages, but they just end up that way. Some novels are short, some are really long, over 1,000, like The Stand. But for the most part, he writes short stories, and some of them are 5 pages, 50, 100. But if he has ideas, he keeps adding them to the story that he's writing. So that 50-page story could turn into 1,000. He doesn't plan it; it just happens. He says that if he plans it, he loses the motivation. He doesn't have that energy to keep writing. He lets the characters solve the problems. He comes up with the plot first, saying that he comes up with the problem, and then he creates characters who will then solve that problem. How? He doesn't know. It just happens. Now, your average new writer will say, wait a second, if Stephen King is a pantser, then I should be as well, because he sold over 100 million books. Clearly, being a pantser is a better way. But it's important for us to remember something about Stephen King. He understands writing on a colossal scale. He even taught writing. He taught English. He has been writing since he was a teenager. When he's not writing, he's reading. So he's studying, because even Stephen King says that if you're not writing, you should be reading, so you can study how other people write and learn from them. And he does this. He's been doing this his entire life. Basically, imagine if there was a book called The Theory of Writing Theory, teaching you everything there is to know about writing. He already has all that information in his head, so he can apply it when he's writing. He knows all about the 3-act structure. Nobody has to tell him about character arc or introduction, the rise and tension and the resolution. He knows all this. It's in his subconscious. He can access it anytime he wants. He knows when he sits down to write a story how to create the introduction of the characters. And then you have that incident that puts the character on the journey where their life changes, where they have to face trials along the way, and then deal with the antagonist at the end. This is what we learn when we want to learn about how to write a novel. There are many books teaching you how to write. And Stephen King doesn't have to read those books, because it's as if he has them all memorized. And when he sits down to write a novel, he accesses all of that information instantly. He applies it to his writing while he is writing. In fact, Stephen King even wrote a book on writing in which he explains how to write a novel, how he writes a novel. And when you read that book and you look at all the tips that he offers, it's clear that he has all the information on how to write in his mind to begin with. So when he writes his novel, he doesn't find himself wandering all over with his characters not having an arc, the story wandering to different places. If you read Cujo or Christine or Carrie, it's clear that he knows how to write a novel. This is why his novels are easily made into movies, because he writes them like a 3-act structure, because he knows what he's doing. Whereas an amateur may not know the rules of writing. So when they sit down as a pantser, their story really can wander all over the place. Think of Mozart. Mozart's father was a great music teacher. And when Mozart sits down to write music, he applies music theory. He has all the music theory in his mind to begin with. He doesn't have to read a book on how to write music. Mozart understood everything there is to know about music theory, and he learned it as a child. So as an adult, when he sat down to write, he was applying music theory to everything he was writing. And this is why if you read and look at Amadeus Mozart's music, all of the theories and rules about writing apply. It wasn't like Mozart was sitting down just making up notes and making it all up. He knew what he was doing because he studied music theory on a colossal scale when he was younger. So it's all in his subconscious. So when he wants to write music without realizing it, he can apply music theory without any worries. Stephen King does the same thing with writing. He applies all the rules of writing without having to think about it. It just happens. So it's important to remember as a writer that you have to study the rules of writing before you can break them or just make them up as you go along. As a writer, the more you know about writing, the more you can apply the rules without even thinking about it. And the next thing you know, you have an amazing novel that's finished that people will read it and think, well, you clearly must be a plotter, because everything that you put into your novels, the way in which you had that cliffhanger at the end of each chapter, the way in which you had the 3-act structure, clearly you knew what you were doing. But the truth is, Stephen King doesn't think like that, but he does on a subconscious level. The more you learn about writing, the more you can apply writing. The faster you can write as a pantser and get it all right without even realizing. If you were to ask Stephen King what's the best advice he could possibly give, he says there are 2 things you need to do to be a great writer. One is you have to write. You can't dream about writing At some point, you really do have to sit down and start writing. Your writing's not going to be great at first, but you will get better in time. The second thing he recommends is you have to read. The more you read, the better you'll become because you simply learn how other people write successful novels. And the more you learn how other people write, the more you can apply it to your writing. And then you write in the morning, you read in the afternoon, and you go back and forth. That is what makes you a better writer. There's no two ways. You can't cheat it. You have to practice your writing, and you have to read other people's writing to learn how to become a better writer. But Stephen King will be the first to tell you that the most important part about writing is characters. It is characters that will move us and make us care. We have to focus in on making these characters real and believable. You don't want to write a story where the characters are thin and boring. It's not the plot that makes us turn the page. It's how the characters deal with the problems that they are facing that we care about. The more you make your characters real and believable and relatable, the more we're going to want to know how they get out of that problem, whatever the problem is. And Stephen King has proven this by writing some of the craziest monsters you can think of. But we don't read for the monsters. We read to see how the characters we care about deal with the monsters. So always remember, when you're writing, it is your characters and how real they are and relatable is what people are going to care about. Now, if you want, I have an amazing blog that you can read on how you can become the best writer you can be. I'm going to leave a link right here for you right now that you can start reading because I want to help you become the greatest writer you can be. And in fact, I have a website that I'll leave a link down below that you can go to my website and you can learn all the tips and tricks on how you can become the greatest writer you can be. Because I want to help you become a great writer. I want to see you succeed. I want to read your newest, latest novel.